freedom, dependency, and accountability. And if you go back and read the accounting of the founders, you'll see they were wrestling with exactly the same thing. And as Representative Wright indicated, they were under a tyrannical king. If you look at that arrangement, and it's up on the slides right now, you see at the top there was a sovereign, which was King George. And of course he had his court, which is the elite. That's society's elite. They're the social, economic, intellectual, and religious elite. They were all in that group. And then there was the government, the apparatus by which they ruled. And then the people. And of course the colonies were down there to be trod on, and that's what was happening. Now this is, I call it man's kingdom. This is how man structures things when man gives the power, when he is the center of the rules. And the key is here, if you look at how power flows and freedom flows, you see that it comes from the king on down to the elite, the government, and the people. And tied to that is freedom. And of course we know by the accounting of the founders that the sovereign continued to exercise more and more tyrannical power and cut their freedoms more and more. So how was that relationship handled, and what sort of a balance was there? Well, it was one-sided. On the other side, the dependency and accountability. Okay, if we go up, start at the bottom, people are accountable and dependent on the government. The government on the elite on the sovereign. Again, the sovereign's got all the strength. Okay, the founders wrestled with this problem. So we'll take a look at what they decided to do with the balance. Now, as we all know, they declared that we were a nation under God. God was the sovereign. God was unchanging. He set his rules, and that's the way they were. And directly under God were the people. And under the people was the government. And I would point out here, there was no place in their structure for the elite. None. They were part of the people. And as a matter of fact, the founders who were the elites of the day, the wealthy of the day, the intellectuals of the day, they didn't carve out a place for themselves. They lived by what they set out as the structure for government. Again, looking at power and freedom. Power and freedom flows from God, unchanging, down to the people. And again, as Representative Wright pointed out, the people share that power and freedom with government to act on their behalf. And of course, this is the way it should be. Government should be dependent on the people and accountable to the people. I think we all kind of want that, don't we? And of course, the people should be accountable to their God, to God, the Christian God in my view, and be dependent on Him. And so that is where our system is based, and it has been rocking along for quite a while that way. But man being the way he is, he continues to work at eroding that structure. So I have recognized, and others have, that the elite have constantly tried to find a way to emerge out of the people and carve a place out in government structure, managing of man's affairs for themselves. And I've called it the fourth branch government. And there's all kinds of names that are given to it, but authorities, boards, commissions, foundations, trusts, NGOs in the UN, NGOs in the US, treaties, MOUs, think tanks, and public-private partnerships, and probably the most egregious of them all is the Federal Reserve. These are all institutions, they're all extra constitutional entities that the elite are in, that influences how our government works. And for the most part, they attach themselves to the executive. So they go around to will the people in the legislature. And we have a lot of examples of that. So let's look at what that does to the founder structure. One thing I'll mention, that we have the elite. I told you that the elite was social, economic, intellectual, and religious. Well, in the fourth branch of government, it's social, economic, and intellectual. And the religious elite have been working separately. And they've been working to create a position to replace God. And so we have religion, and religion is defined by man's will in this context. And so that's going on in this country. So the people find themselves bounded by the elite once again. Now we still have the guise of the structure being this way, where the government reports to the people. And the people, are struggling with what they believe about their religion. And again, power and freedom, dependency, accountability. But you can begin to see how it gets eroded. America is evolving. It has evolved to some structure like this. And we're at a critical point in our history. And we need to think about what the founders would do in this situation. But let's look at the last one. This is where we're headed. If we're not careful, it's going to flip. And it's all positioned to flip. The elite are all in place. And the elite would have it that they would run the government, and the government would tell us, the people, what to do. And ultimately, we can have whatever religion we want. It won't affect anything. And that's where we're headed. The question is that where we want to end up? So think about these structures. And look at what's going on today. And decide how power, freedom, dependency, and accountability are being handled. And if they're not being handled like the founders laid it out, then we don't have the kind of government the Constitution calls for.
Thank you, Ken. Our fourth and final panelist this evening is Gary Casey. Gary is 32 years old and is a third-generation graduate of the Claremore High School. He graduated in 1994. Gary attended OSU, I won't hold that against him, and in 1994, and Southwestern Assembly of God University, and graduated in 1998. He has been married to his wife Elizabeth for 6 years and resides in northwest Tulsa in the neighborhood his wife's family has lived for 4 generations. Gary currently works as an IT professional for Flight Safety International in Broken Arrow. He is the precinct chairman for Precinct 147 and was a delegate for his county, district, and state conventions, and is currently running, as said earlier, running for the state Senate seat for District 33 in Tulsa. Please join me in welcoming Gary Casey.
I tend to be soft-spoken, so if you can't hear me, please just point out for something. One of the biggest inspirations to me, one is being around people like this, Randy and John and Ken, and as a young person, seeing their fortitude and commitment to constitutional principles and godly principles. And another source of inspiration for me is our Founding Fathers, the things they wrote. The more that I read our Founding Fathers, and the more I read the philosophy behind it, the more sense it makes, and the more I agree with it. And I'm going to try not to ramble on too long and bore you to death with quotes, but these are things that have inspired me and things that I want to share with you about how I feel about the proper role of government. A 17th century British philosopher named John Locke, who is considered to be an inspirer of the Declaration of Independence, believed the government's power is best limited by dividing government up into branches, with each branch having only as much power as needed for its proper function. For people To quit to government the natural rights and give to government absolute arbitrary power is indeed a very dangerous step.